Welcome to a very tragic story. Today, we revisit two tragedies that, despite the passage of time, remain part of the darkest chapters in Canadian history. The first story is a story of loss, of injustice, of intelligence failures, and of lingering pain for the families left behind. This is the story of Air India Flight 182, the deadliest terrorist attack ever to target Canada. And yet, for years, it was overlooked, underreported, and for many, even forgotten. June 23, 1985, a bright, clear day in Canada. Hundreds of passengers board Air India Flight 182, their minds filled with thoughts of family, of home, of summer vacations in India. Among them are 82 children, some as young as 2 years old. Parents hug them tightly, adjusting their tiny backpacks, whispering promises of reunion in a few weeks. None of them know that in just a few hours, they will become victims of one of the most horrific acts of terrorism the world has ever seen. At Pearson International Airport in Toronto, a suitcase is checked in under a fake name. Its owner never boards the flight. That suitcase carries death, a bomb set with a timer, programmed to detonate at 31,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. The aircraft, named Kanishka, takes off from Toronto, makes a stop in Montreal, and then continues on its path toward London, where it is scheduled to refuel before heading to Delhi. It never makes it. At about 7:14 a.m. GMT, flying high above the Atlantic just off the coast of Ireland, the passengers are relaxed, some enjoying breakfast, others chatting softly, and the children, perhaps pressing their noses to the windows, marveling at the endless sky around them. Then, in a single deafening moment, silence. An explosion tears through the forward cargo hold. The aircraft is ripped apart instantly. Within seconds, the nose of the plane snaps off. Cabin depressurizes violently. Passengers, still strapped to their seats, are sucked into the freezing air. The aircraft's body spirals out of control, breaking into pieces before it slams into the dark waters of the Atlantic Ocean. 329 souls, gone. Just like that. And if that wasn't enough, on the very same day, a second bomb explodes at Tokyo's Narita Airport, meant for another Air India flight. It detonates too early, killing 2 baggage handlers instead of an entire plane load of innocent passengers. As the world reels in shock, investigators quickly determine that this was no accident. It was an act of terror. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. The Canadian government had warnings. Intelligence agencies had information. And yet, they failed, completely and utterly, to prevent this massacre. For months before the attack, Sikh extremists in Canada had been plotting revenge for India's Operation Blue Star, which saw Indian forces storm the Golden Temple in Punjab to eliminate armed militants. The mastermind behind this attack? Talwinder Singh Parmar, the leader of Babar Khalsa, a militant Sikh separatist group operating out of British Columbia. His group sought vengeance, and they found it in the blood of 329 innocent people. But what makes this tragedy even more heartbreaking is that Canadian authorities had been monitoring these extremists. There were wiretaps, intercepted conversations, clear indications that something terrible was being planned, and yet nothing was done. Nothing! CSIS, Canada's intelligence agency, actually erased some of the wiretap recordings before they could be used as evidence in court. Can you imagine that? The very agency meant to protect its citizens destroyed key evidence in the deadliest terrorist attack in Canadian history. The investigation dragged on for years, but justice never came. Out of all the people involved, only one man, Inderjit Singh Rayat, was convicted, and even then, only for manslaughter and perjury. He spent just 15 years in prison. The other suspects walked free. The families left to mourn in silence. No justice, no closure, no real accountability. And the worst part? For years, this wasn't even acknowledged as Canada's worst act of terrorism. It wasn't taught in schools. It wasn't widely spoken about. The victims, many of them Canadian citizens, were largely forgotten by the very country they called home. It wasn't until 2010, 25 years later, that the Canadian government issued a formal apology to the victims' families. 25 years. Think about that. Imagine losing your child, your spouse, your parents in such a brutal act of violence and then being ignored for decades. That is the true tragedy of Air India Flight 182. And here we are, nearly 40 years later, and this case still haunts us. In late 2024, a petition in Canada, supported by a member of Parliament, circulated a conspiracy theory suggesting that the real story of Air India Flight 182 hadn't been told. This petition gained thousands of signatures, forcing the government to respond. Imagine that, after all this time, people still trying to distort the truth. Then there was the revelation that CSIS may have had a mole inside the terrorist group before the bombing, but pulled him out to avoid exposure. If this is true, it means the attack might have been preventable. And in 2022, Ripudaman Singh Malik, one of the men acquitted in the case, was gunned down in Surrey, British Columbia. In 2024, 2 men pleaded guilty to his murder, but they refused to say who hired them. Was it revenge? Was it a cover-up? We may never know. The tragedy of Air India Flight 182 isn't just about the hundreds of lives lost. It's about a nation that failed to protect its own. It's about families who never got justice. It's about lessons that we cannot afford to forget. Today, security measures are stricter. Airport screenings are more advanced. Terrorist plots are harder to execute. But what about those who lost loved ones that day? Their pain never fades. Their questions remain unanswered. Their grief, their anger, it lingers, just as fresh as it was on June 23, 1985. The second story, a sad story of lives lost in the deep waters off Nova Scotia. On September 2, 1998, the sun is setting across the Atlantic as passengers settle into their seats on Swissair Flight 111, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11 preparing to depart from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. For many, this is a familiar journey, a routine flight to Geneva, Switzerland. Among them are business travelers, honeymooners, tourists, and even a few high-profile passengers, including a scientist who helped discover the HIV virus. At 2018 EDT, Swissair Flight 111 takes off from JFK, climbing smoothly into the evening sky. The captain, Urs Zimmermann, and first officer, Stefan Loh, are highly experienced pilots, confident in their ability to handle any situation. For the first 50 minutes, everything seems normal. But then, at 2110 EDT, a faint but unmistakable smell of smoke is detected in the cockpit. At first, it seems harmless, but as any experienced pilot knows, smoke on an aircraft is never a good sign. The crew quickly begins troubleshooting, searching for the source. By 2113, the flight crew contacts air traffic control in Moncton, Canada. They request to divert to Boston for an emergency landing. At this point, no one realizes just how little time they have left. Over the next few minutes, the situation rapidly deteriorates. The smell of smoke intensifies. The pilots, now concerned, receive clearance to descend and prepare for an emergency landing in Halifax, 56 miles away. But then, disaster strikes. At 2124 EDT, just 20 minutes away from Halifax, the crew shuts down parts of the electrical system to prevent a fire from spreading. But slowly, the fire becomes out of control. Smoke fills the cockpit. Instruments fail one by one. Barely 5 minutes later, at about 2131 EDT, the pilots declare Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is a desperate call for help, but time is running out. The aircraft is not just still flying, but it is now barely controllable. The cockpit is growing unbearably hot, making it difficult to see, difficult to breathe. The pilots, skilled professionals, are fighting to save their passengers, but they are losing the battle against time and fire. Just immediately after the Mayday call, Swissair Flight 111 loses all radio contact, the aircraft now completely crippled. The plane makes a sharp right turn, veering away from its approach to Halifax. It enters a rapid descent, a terrifying dive at nearly 350 miles per hour. Sadly, in an instant, just off the coast of Nova Scotia, the aircraft slams into the Atlantic Ocean near the fishing village of Peggy's Cove. There were 215 passengers and 14 crew members aboard, 229 souls, unaware that this flight will never reach its destination. The impact was devastating. There was no chance of survival. The aircraft was instantly shattered into thousands of pieces. The water is filled with debris, and the cold, dark ocean swallows the remains of 229 people. News of the crash spreads across the nation. Within hours, rescue teams are dispatched, but what they find is heartbreaking. Floating wreckage, shattered belongings, and no survivors. Families across the world, parents, spouses, children, are waking up to their worst nightmare. On September 3, 1998, the first bodies are recovered. Families begin arriving in Halifax, desperately hoping for any news, any miracle. Sadly, there was none. The next day, the painstaking task of recovering remains and wreckage begins. Divers brave the deep waters, searching for anything that can bring closure. In October that year, the black boxes are found, revealing the horrifying truth. The fire had spread unseen above the cockpit, feeding on flammable insulation materials. The pilots never stood a chance. The investigation into Swissair Flight 111 took 4 years and cost $57 million. What it reveals is infuriating. This tragedy was preventable. The fire was caused by faulty wiring in the first-class entertainment system. Flammable insulation material allowed the fire to spread rapidly. The pilots followed standard procedures, but those procedures were not designed for a fire of this magnitude. In response, aviation authorities worldwide overhaul safety regulations. New standards were put in place to prevent such a disaster from ever happening again. But for the families, it's too late. Their loved ones are gone, lost forever in the deep Atlantic waters. Today, off the coast of Peggy's Cove, a memorial stands, simple yet powerful. It bears the names of all 229 victims, a reminder of lives lost too soon. Each year, families gather there, their grief as fresh as it was that terrible night in 1998. Swissair Flight 111 is a story of heartbreak, but it is also a warning. In aviation, in life, safety can never be taken for granted. The lessons of that night were paid for with the lives of 229 people who had dreams, families, futures. We tell this story to remember and honor them, and above all, we must strive to achieve the safest air travel. That's all for today, my friend. Please like and subscribe, as this will help this channel grow. Also, do well to share your thoughts in the comment section below. See you in our next video.